The dust sector was where stars went to die, and rules came to be ignored. It was the kind of place where forgotten satellites drifted like ghosts and lost cargo ships whispered stories into the void. No one patrolled this deep unless they had to, and today, human officer Jace Marrow and his alien partner, Lieutenant Rizel, had to. Their ship, the Resolute Drift, moved silently through the wreckage field of broken hulls and shattered trade routes. Jace sat in the co-pilot's seat, eyes fixed on the monitor, chewing the inside of his cheek, while Rizel's slender violet fingers glided over controls with precision only Thalan training could produce. They weren't expecting anything unusual, maybe a rogue miner or a rusted hauler off its course. But then, a silent alert flashed. A derelict cargo ship, unmarked and barely running on backup power, floated ahead. No broadcast codes. No response to pings. Just a single flickering signal, life signs aboard. Curious and cautious, they docked. Jace led the way, blaster drawn, helmet sealed. The interior of the cargo hauler was cold and quiet, coated in dust and the smell of old wiring and long-forgotten fuel. The ship groaned with every step as if complaining about the intrusion. They found the bridge empty, systems fried, logs erased. Whoever had been here didn't want to be found. Then Rizel noticed an odd energy signature coming from one of the freight containers below deck. They followed it, stepping through narrow corridors until they reached the container. Its door was sealed with a double-lock code not registered in any system. That was strange enough, but what was stranger was the faint, repetitive tapping coming from inside. A knock, then silence. Then another. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone too afraid to call out. Jace looked at Rizel, who nodded once. With a hiss, the container door opened. And there, huddled together under dim emergency lights, were children. Not human. Not Thaluan. Not even one species, but several tiny figures with glowing eyes, thin limbs, different colors and shapes and markings. Their clothes were torn, their skin pale or bruised. Most didn't speak. One cried silently, clinging to another. The air was heavy with fear. Jace froze, lowering his weapon. Rizel stepped forward slowly, kneeling, speaking softly in the universal tongue, but the children only shrank back. No translators activated. No response. They had been silenced in more ways than one. Jace's instincts, kicked in years in the field, told him this wasn't an accident or a rescue mission gone wrong. Someone had put these kids here on purpose. Smuggled. Hidden. Abandoned. His comm clicked as he called back to their ship, asking for med scans and emergency rations. They couldn't leave them here. But just as they began to lift the smallest child into a warm blanket, the cargo ship's AI system jolted back to life with a sudden, sharp ping. A warning. Self-destruct countdown initiated. 10 minutes. Jace swore under his breath. Rizel ran for the engineering panel while Jace started lifting the children, one by one, into the transport sled they brought with them. The minutes raced past. The override codes failed. The smuggler had erased everything and planted a remote kill switch to wipe all evidence if anyone got too close. They had no choice. Rizel triggered an emergency detachment of the container unit, locking it to their patrol ship's docking clamp. Just as they disengaged, the cargo vessel exploded behind them in a silent bloom of metal and fire, sending a shockwave through space that knocked their small craft into a spin. Stabilizers screamed to correct the course. Inside the container, the children screamed, huddling together, terrified. Jace and Rizel steadied the ship, hearts pounding, minds racing. They had no idea where these children had come from or who had smuggled them. There were no records, no ID tags, no memory files. And worst of all, no one looking for them. ASA, they finally gained control of their ship and set course for the nearest outpost. Jace stared at the screen showing the container's interior. The children sat close together, their eyes wide, confused, and afraid. None of them spoke. None of them cried out loud. But every so often, they would glance toward the camera as if searching for someone they didn't believe existed. Parents, maybe. Or protectors. Something about it made Jace's stomach tighten in a way no battlefield ever had. Beside him, Rizel studied the readings in silence, then said something he hadn't said in all their years of service together. "This wasn't just smuggling," he whispered. "This was erasure. Someone didn't just want to hide them. They wanted to forget they ever existed." And Jace, who had seen war and death and corruption, felt a chill run through him. Because deep down, he knew Rizel was right. This wasn't a random find. This wasn't luck. They had stepped into something dark, something hidden beneath the cracks of civilization. And someone somewhere was willing to kill to keep it that way. The explosion had shaken the patrol ship to its core, but the container holding the children was still intact and docked securely. As the wreckage of the cargo hauler floated behind them like burning debris in the dark, Officer Jace Marrow gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white, heart pounding. Rizel was already checking the vitals of the children from the control station, his large dark eyes narrowed in concern. The ship's AI confirmed the children were stable, but the emotional stress was climbing fast. Jace glanced at the screen showing the inside of the container again. The children still didn't speak, still didn't move much, only watched the camera like they didn't know if they were safe or if this was just another stage in their nightmare. Rizel tapped the console, scanning their DNA signatures. "They're not registered with any known refugee databases," he said quietly. "No records. No guardians. It's as if they were never born." That statement sat heavy in the air. Jace didn't answer, just turned the patrol ship toward the nearest coalition outpost, an old station called Epsilon 6 that still had working med units and quiet corridors where no one asked too many questions. Protocol said they should report in, wait for orders, but Jace's gut told him something was wrong at a level higher than them. Whoever had put those kids on that ship didn't want them rescued. He didn't trust command to do the right thing this time. They flew in silence, only the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beeping of the medical scanner filling the cabin. Halfway to the outpost, Rizel's hand twitched over his console. "There's a transmission," he said, voice suddenly tight. "Encrypted, bouncing off civilian relays. Someone's tracking us." Jace moved fast, cutting their signal output, changing their ship's identifier code. But it was too late. An unknown vessel dropped out of warp directly ahead, sleek and dark with no coalition markings. It didn't hail them, didn't identify itself, just powered weapons and locked onto their ship. "They want the kids," Jace muttered, jaw tight. "No ID, no call sign, bounty hunters." Rizel shook his head. "Too well equipped. They're not after money. They're sent to clean up." The unknown ship fired a warning shot, missing on purpose, but only barely. Jace pushed the thrusters and veered off course, plunging into a nearby asteroid field, hoping the thick rock clusters would buy them time. The enemy ship followed, weaving through space debris like a predator. Jace dodged through the field, scraping hull plating against stone as Rizel worked fast, rerouting power to shields and scanning for a possible escape vector. Behind them, the container shook inside. The children clung to one another, silent tears running down some of their small, strange faces. They didn't scream. They didn't panic. It was as if they were used to running, used to being hunted. The realization stung something deep in Jace's chest. This wasn't just trafficking. This was something worse. These kids were being erased, one transport at a time. They finally made it through the field, using the explosion of a small asteroid to mask their trail. The enemy ship didn't follow. Either it lost them or it didn't want to risk damage, but Jace knew it wouldn't be the last encounter. They reached Epsilon 6 2 hours later. It was quiet, the way forgotten stations were lights dim, one dockmaster, and a small team of med drones running diagnostics. Rizel brought the children in under quarantine protocols to avoid questions. The kids still didn't speak, but one, a small, green-skinned girl with glowing patterns on her arms, watched Jace closely as he carried another younger child in his arms. Her eyes were large and sad, but something about her stare felt aware, intelligent beyond her years. Inside the medbay, scans revealed more troubling details. Genetic markers showed many of the children came from systems that were supposed to be extinct colonies that had gone silent during border wars, and never returned to contact. "This doesn't make sense," Rizel said, scrolling through the data. "Their blood carries memory imprints. That means they were born with shared ancestral memories, very rare, and often considered dangerous by old science circles. Some cultures believe such children could remember things they weren't supposed to." Jace leaned back, processing it all. These kids weren't just orphans. They were links to lost worlds, living evidence of something someone powerful wanted to erase. He tried to reach out to a friend in the media, someone who had helped expose war crimes during the lunar treaties, but before the message could be sent, a transmission came through from Coalition Command. It was short, cold, direct. "You are ordered to surrender all discovered passengers from Incident 119K immediately. Do not attempt further communication. Investigation is concluded." Jace stared at the message, stunned. No questions. No offers for aid. Just a command to hand them over like they were stolen goods. He looked at Rizel, who already understood. This was bigger than a simple smuggling case. There were people in high places who didn't want these children found. The investigation had never even started. That night, while the children rested in the warmth of the med bay, wrapped in silver blankets and under soft lighting, Jace stood by the viewing window, watching the stars shift beyond. Behind him, Rizel walked in, silent for a long time. "If we report them in," he said finally, "they'll disappear. No trial. No questions. Just gone." Jace nodded slowly. "Then we don't report them." And just like that, 2 law officers became fugitives, not for stealing, not for rebellion, but for saving lives that someone powerful had tried to bury in the dark. They didn't know where they would go yet, or who they could trust. But one thing was certain, they weren't giving the kids up. Not now. Not ever. The stars looked peaceful outside the window of the patrol ship, but peace was an illusion now. Jace Morrow sat alone in the ship's lower deck, watching the children through the transparent wall of the med bay module. They were asleep or pretending to be. Most huddled together in pairs or small groups, close but still quiet, like speaking was dangerous. The little green-skinned girl with the glowing marks, the one who had watched him earlier, was the only one sitting upright. She didn't say anything, but her eyes followed Jace every time he moved. There was something in her gaze, something that felt heavy with meaning, like she understood more than she should for someone so young. Rizel returned from a system scan and sat beside him without a word. They both knew they were fugitives now, marked by their own command as traitors, though their only crime was refusing to hand innocent lives over to the people who wanted them gone. Rizel had managed to decode part of a gene map from one of the children's scans. What he found was disturbing: traces of old refugee identification markers, mixed with a genetic signature linked to a forgotten treaty known as the Breen Accord. It had been signed decades ago between warring planets, promising protection for displaced families and war orphans, but was officially dissolved when the colonies that signed it vanished during the border collapses. And yet, here were the children. Proof the colonies hadn't simply vanished, they'd been erased. Jace couldn't understand how any government, any council, could allow this. The thought that someone powerful had found a way to turn surviving children into forgotten cargo made his chest tighten with anger. As Rizel ran further scans, he discovered something even stranger. Several of the children shared telepathic patterns. They couldn't speak using their mouths, but they were communicating silently among each other, using tiny glances, small gestures, shared emotion. The med unit's sensors began detecting sudden waves of neural activity, especially when the children were near Jace or Rizel. It was like the kids were slowly opening up, learning who to trust. That night, something happened that neither of the officers could explain. As Jace entered the medbay to deliver nutrient packs, the small green-skinned girl stood up and walked to him. She stared for a moment, then reached out and gently placed her tiny hand over his chest. Her eyes glowed faintly, and for a split second, Jace felt something: images, memories, maybe not his own. Flashes of burning skies, of running feet, of hiding in dark places and losing the people who once held her. Then came a word, not spoken, but felt soft, uncertain, but clear. Protector. Jace stood still, heart caught in his throat. She didn't need a translator. She didn't need to speak. She had chosen him. Rizel watched from the doorway, saying nothing, but something in his expression changed like even he, who had always followed orders, now believed that this mission was bigger than law and duty. The next morning, they checked for warp trails in the nearby sectors and confirmed their fears. The enemy ship that had attacked them earlier had not left the system. It was still hunting, still tracking. Coalition Command had likely sent more after them. They couldn't stay at Epsilon 6 any longer. Rizel suggested an ancient wormhole network used during the early smuggler wars, a hidden backdoor into the old fringe colonies. Dangerous, unstable, forgotten. But it was their only chance. Before leaving, they sent a secure message to a distant contact, an old intelligence officer who had once blown the whistle on illegal bioweapons experiments and vanished into hiding. If anyone could help them now, it was him. As the resolute drift entered the wormhole, Jace looked back at the children one last time. The green-skinned girl was holding hands with two younger ones now. She gave him the same look, quiet, steady, trusting. Somehow, they bonded, even without words. The ship trembled as it slipped into the swirling light of the unstable wormhole. Systems flickered. Gravity warped. But the children didn't cry. They didn't panic. They stayed close, holding on to one another, and to something else, hope. And Jace realized something he hadn't before. These kids weren't just victims. They were survivors. And maybe, just maybe, they were something more, something rare and powerful that the galaxy hadn't seen in a long time. Not weapons. Not threats. But something pure. Something worth protecting. And for the first time in years, Jace didn't feel like just a soldier or an officer. He felt like something else. Something the children already believed he was. A guardian. The wormhole tunnel shook like it wanted to tear the ship apart, its swirling light flickering against the windows as time stretched and space narrowed. Jace Marrow gripped the edge of the command chair as alarms echoed through the resolute drift's narrow bridge. Rizel, calm but focused, kept his hands on the controls, adjusting shield output and compensating for gravitational warps every second. The children stayed in the secure medbay, the container locked down but monitored. Their small faces showed quiet strength, still afraid, still silent, but no longer frozen like they had been when Jace first found them. The green-skinned girl remained near the others, keeping them calm without speaking, her glowing arm patterns pulsing slowly like waves. Then, with a sudden pull that twisted the ship's frame and a crack of pressure that made Jace's ears pop, they exited the wormhole and found themselves in the dead zone beyond the old neutral rim. It was space no one traveled anymore. No traffic lanes. No broadcasts. No stations on record. Just the ruins of forgotten outposts and hollowed-out moons orbiting a dying sun. And hiding in that graveyard of lost history was a single ship, old but functional, camouflaged against an asteroid. It powered up as they approached, broadcasting only one word through a tight beam encrypted signal: welcome. The man they met on board the hidden ship was older than Jace expected, human, gray-haired, with scars across one side of his face and a mechanical arm that buzzed when he moved it. He introduced himself only as Carrick, a former Coalition intelligence officer who'd vanished from records 15 years ago after leaking classified documents that exposed the illegal testing of mind-linked children during the border wars. "You found them, didn't you?" he said quietly, staring at the scan files Rizel uploaded. "The lost ones. The memory-bonded generation." Jace didn't answer at first, but the look in his eyes said everything. Carrick explained what he knew: how a secret division within the old Coalition had collected children from destroyed colonies, especially those with genetic traits linked to memory retention and neural resonance. They believed those children could be used to store tactical data, even battlefield experience, as living carriers. But when the war ended, the truth was buried. The children were smuggled away, hidden or discarded. Many thought they had all died. But some, like the ones Jason Rizel found, had survived in the shadows. As Carrick guided them to a deep storage chamber filled with old data cores. Jace realized how far this went. There were files here, hundreds of them, on other missing children, destroyed settlements, erased transport logs. It wasn't one ship or one smuggling route. It was an entire cover-up stretched across years, maybe decades. And now that someone had found proof, those responsible would do anything to keep it buried. "They'll come for you," Carrick said. "You're not just protecting them now. You're protecting the truth." Back on the Resolute Drift, the children sensed the tension. The medbay sensors picked up stronger neural waves, flashes of fear, warning, and strange emotional pressure. The green-skinned girl approached Rizel during a system check and, without speaking, showed him a simple image projected from her glowing palms. It was a star map, not one from the Coalition records, but from memory. Her memory. And at the center of it was a system long marked as destroyed Thresa V, believed to be wiped out during a solar flare collapse 10 years ago. But her image showed it was still alive, hidden, shielded. Jace, Rizel, and Carrick studied the coordinates. It was far, and there was no guarantee the system still supported life. But if it did, it might be where the rest of the children were being held, or where others like them had escaped to. "It could be a trap," Rizel warned. "Or it could be the only place left that holds the full truth," Jace said. They had to choose. Run forever and stay hidden, or take the risk and find the source of it all. As they prepared to leave, Carrick handed Jace a small memory core. "This is everything I have. If something happens to me, get it to someone who can speak. Someone who won't be silenced." Jace nodded, the weight of the tiny device heavier than it looked. As they undocked from the hidden ship, the Resolute Drift turned toward the cold dark of deep space, with a new destination and a growing danger behind them. The children, silent but aware, sat together once more. This time, the green-skinned girl didn't just watch Jace. She stood at the transparent wall, her eyes glowing faintly, as if she knew exactly what came next. Not fear, not escape, but a journey towards something long buried, something that could change everything. The Resolute Drift moved silently through the edge of known space, carrying not just its crew, but a truth long buried alive, breathing and watching. The ship's engines hummed low as they followed the star map drawn from the memory of the green-skinned girl, heading toward the forgotten system of Thresa V, believed by most to be dead. The journey took days, and though the children never spoke a word, they grew closer to Jace and Rizel, their trust blooming in quiet moments, offering food, holding hands during jumps, even small smiles when Jace told them old Earth stories to pass the time. Rizel, once rigid and rule-bound, now laughed softly when a small, silver-eyed boy mimicked his scanner work with perfect accuracy, curious and eager to help. It was as if the ship had become something more than a vessel. It had become a home, a promise, and a shield for these lost souls. But the danger was still behind them. Twice, they picked up faint Coalition signals, distant ships tracing their warp signature. The hunters hadn't given up. Whoever wanted these children hidden wasn't done yet. When they arrived at the edge of the Thresa system, what they saw stunned them all. The planet, marked as destroyed in every Coalition file, was not only intact, it was protected. A cloaking field, ancient and powerful, shimmered around it, bending light and radar. Jace piloted slowly, careful not to trigger any defenses, while Rizel scanned for life. The readings came in strong hundreds, maybe thousands of signals, all faint, all quiet, as if the entire world had been living in silence for years. Then, unexpectedly, the cloaking field opened a path. No alarm, no challenge, just a silent welcome. The Resolute Drift descended into the atmosphere and passed through clouds toward a valley lit by twin suns. Below, structures came into view, simple, beautiful, built into the stone itself. And standing on the landing platform were people. Some were adults. Some were children. All of them looked different skin colors not seen on any official database, glowing patterns, ancient eyes. And every one of them stared at the ship as if they had been waiting for it. The green-skinned girl walked to the front of the med bay as the ramp opened. She stepped out first, without fear, her tiny hand lifted in greeting. What followed next was not chaos or panic but recognition. Some of the people on the platform rushed forward with tears in their eyes. Parents, siblings, caretakers, people who had believed their children were lost forever. Jace and Rizel watched in stunned silence as reunion after reunion unfolded, as the quiet children in their care were lifted into arms, called by names they had never spoken aloud. Not all of the children found family that day. Some stood alone, but others took their hands, welcomed them, gave them smiles and quiet comfort. No one was left behind. The truth slowly became clear. This hidden colony had been sheltering survivors for years, keeping their light alive in the dark. And now they were whole again, at least in part. Jace handed over the memory core Carrick had given him to one of the elders, a tall woman with eyes like stars. She promised it would be shared with the few still brave enough to listen, so the galaxy could finally hear what had been silenced for so long. Before they left, the green-skinned girl returned to Jace one last time. She placed both hands over his and looked up at him, her eyes glowing softly. In that moment, a message passed between them, not words, but feeling. Safety, gratitude, hope, protector. She didn't need to say anything else. As Jace and Rizel stood aboard the Resolute Drift, watching the platform fade into the distance behind them, neither spoke for a long time. The stars ahead were still cold. The danger wasn't fully gone, but something had changed. They had carried more than passengers. They had carried a future.